We have multiple Toronto Maple Leafs updates to go over today as Leafs hockey is on the cusp of returning. Players are back skating. And we have some very intriguing updates to go over today surrounding Connor Dewar and Calle Jarnkrok, as well as multiple others. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. But before we get into it, quick reminder, hit that subscribe button. If you're a part of the 70 or so percent who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. If you're enjoying the content every single day, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're obviously a day away from the Leafs versus not the Leafs versus US, like I said yesterday. Team Canada versus the US, but we're also a couple days away from the Leafs playing on Saturday and mixing up a lot of the team names here. But Darius, there's a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, the Leafs are back skating, which is a good sign. We're back to a bit of a normal schedule now, albeit players in the Four Nations face-off aren't obviously skating for the Leafs today. But we have some updates that pertain to the Leafs pretty heavily when it comes to the return of game action. I want to start with Connor Dewar. He was out, if you remember, it seems like months ago now, even though it was only just, a couple weeks ago. He's been out now for the last 7 games. You see here, Connor Dewar is back on the ice this morning, and he is practicing with the team. Again, he's been out for the past 7 games. So I want to hear your thoughts on this first, because he's obviously was a critical part of that fourth line, whether it be on the PK, whether it just be giving some stability to that fourth line, because they've been running now a mix of Ryan Reeves, obviously Steven Lorentz and David Kampfer there. But it's as the deadline approaches, and that's what a lot of these conversations are going to be had now, is who is going to earn themselves a spot to not get traded, basically, and not have their spot replaced. And Connor Dewar, I don't think he's going to get traded, but his spot could be replaced depending on what they do. So it's good to see him back.
It could be, or he could take somebody else's spot. We've heard that David Camp could be a cap casualty at this year's trade deadline. So that is still up in the air. But like you said, it seems like they've been off for months at this point. I don't know what it is. I mean, we have hockey during the break right now with the Four Nations, but for some reason it feels like we haven't watched a Leafs game in months. I don't know what it is. But anyway, they are back skating today and, with full contact as well. Yesterday, that was just everybody kind of getting loose, getting back on the ice. Today was a full practice. And Connor Dewar back on the ice, that's a good sign. Obviously, he was hurt even, when they took the break for the Four Nations face-off. So he's nearing a return, but he's going to be a very important player, I think, for the Leafs. Whether he's in the lineup every night or not, he's going to play a very significant role on their fourth line in the playoffs. If he gets into the lineup, if there are injuries, because he has been pretty good and he can kill penalties like we've seen. So I'm not too sure they're going to trade him because of what he makes. I mean, like, there's no reason to. I feel like he does add value to the team. But it could be interesting. A lot of these guys are going to fight for spots at this point. And with some news of Max Pacioretty being injured again this morning at practice, which we'll get to as well, it could be another situation where he finds himself higher in the lineup than originally expected. So it's going to be interesting. And obviously, Alex Steves got called up yesterday. I think that has some to do with his play and some to do with, obviously, Matthews is not here. Nylander hadn't joined the group yet. Obviously, Mitch Marner's still away at the Four Nations. So it's going to get interesting here in the second half of the season.
Yeah, and hopefully Connor Dewar can. I mean, if Pacioretty's out, he's probably going to play anyways, whether it be on the third or fourth line. But I want to see what he can do because he's a very good penalty killer and he has a niche role. And I think for his cap hit, he's probably worth having around if injuries happen, whether or not they acquire a third line center at the deadline, a second line center, even a fourth liner as well as a part of a bigger trade. It'll be interesting. Speaking about third and fourth line, you have Calle Jarnkrok, and he's been out the entire year, and he is wearing a blue sweater as the Leafs practice begins. Yanni Hakanpää is participating as well, and Connor Dewar was on the ice earlier, but has since left. So Darius, there's a bunch of different things here. We're starting to see some faces now that we haven't seen all year, really, aside from Hakanpää, I believe in 1 or 2 games. But you have Calle Jarnkrok wearing a blue sweater. It seems like he is, according to Kirk, really coming along after participating in practice today. Great to have him out there today. He needs time to practice with us, put in the work, see where he's at, and make sure he's feeling good. It's very interesting now. We're seeing a lot of returns, players on the cusp of returning, and this is also as we're on the cusp of the trade deadline happening. So you have moves coming from Leafs are definitely going to make moves. And now they have a ton of depth flooding in too, and as well with Yanni Hakanpää as well. So it's going to get extremely interesting to see how they kind of weed out what players, because they have an abundance of forwards now that, not all of them are going to be able to factor in. And I'm going to be very intrigued to see and curious to see how Calle Jarnkrok does specifically.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far ahead of anything at this point because he still needs to get more practice reps in. This is his first practice of the entire season, besides training camp when he originally sustained that injury. But we're going to see something that I didn't think we were going to see this season after the news of his surgery and his diagnosis, which is he's probably going to play this season, whether it's in the regular season or the playoffs. Now, it's going to get very interesting because we know that they want to make a move at the trade deadline. We know that a move is going to happen. If it's Scott Laughton or someone else, or if it's a depth defenseman, they're going to make a trade. But obviously with the salary cap the way it is, I think they have just under $3 million in deadline cap space. If Calle Jarnkrok comes back into the lineup before the playoffs, that really it doesn't make sense, right? So I wonder if they keep him out if he continues to practice and they pull off a bit of a Nikita Kucherov move from a couple of years ago, minus the skill. Obviously, Calle Jarnkrok is not Nikita Kucherov, but if they pull something like that and they insert him back into the playoff lineup to have some more depth. Now, I don't know if that's a great idea. I think you'd rather have guys in there who've played all year, but on the other side of things, if he's practiced, if he's up to speed and he feels confident and the team feels confident in him, to come to the playoffs, he would be 100%. He would not be banged up from the season at all. So he could be a very valuable asset for the Leafs. I wouldn't trade him at this point in time. And I don't know if he plays in the regular season this year, but it looks like he is going to play this year and it could be in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. And depending what they do at the trade deadline, if they can get kind of creative with the cap space, maybe we do see him in the regular season, but I think that's just going to be too hard to manage at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're really coming along, so I could see him coming back over the next couple months, depending. But again, the playoffs are approaching, the trade deadline, which again in the NBA or the NHL, sorry, and the NBA, the NHL is extremely late. So, and you've been mentioning that a lot. Like, it's by the time they make these moves to get them acclimated to the team. That's why they're probably going to go ahead and get, like you mentioned, a guy like Scott Laughton and a player of that nature. And surrounding some more updates, William Nylander's back in Toronto today, and it will be up to him to decide if he wants to get on the ice following the Four Nations tournament. I mean, he played a lot. He was playing hard as well out there. So shout out to him and Sweden. A bunch of different things as well to go over here. We also heard about some injuries surrounding Max Pacioretty, but before we get into that, just to kind of tie up on Calle Jarnkrok, he had an interesting comment, and we haven't heard him speak out. I haven't really heard much from him at all so far this season because he's been kind of behind the scenes there. He said, I don't know, I mean, it's first two practices back with the team. I might need a couple practices before I can say anything about that, but it's fun to be back, and this was, of course, talking about a projected return with him. Darius, I want to get your thoughts on both this, but also the Max Pacioretty injury that happened today and how that could affect Calle Jarnkrok or even any of these forwards. Bobby McMann should dive into a minute as well, how they go with the lines here.
Well, I don't think it will in terms of cap space still. They're still going to have to make that work, especially if they want to make a trade if Max Pacioretty's out now. And for those of you wondering, Max Pacioretty, he just tweaked something on the ice early this morning and then he didn't participate in practice. So Craig Berube doesn't think it's going to be anything significant and he should be back and should actually play as soon as Saturday. But we'll see if there's any updates on that tomorrow because this season has been, we knew it was going to happen with Max Pacioretty. We knew at the start of the year. But to go back to the start of the year, again, Calle Jarnkrok, if you remember, I did say, maybe they end up trading him at training camp because it was like just to make the salary cap work. It seemed like they had a couple guys in mind that they'd rather in those spots at the time, like Bobby McMann, for example, who didn't even play opening night, and look what he's doing now. So at this point in time, I wouldn't trade him with everything that's transpired. You can really use him as a guy in the playoffs. So it looks like he's feeling better. He's ready to get back on the ice. His NHL career was in question at one point this season, but it looks like he might be back for the playoffs.
Yeah, gonna be very, very exciting. A couple other things, Craig Berube, feel free to pause and read this, but it's surrounding Bobby McMann's development and his speed getting on top of people in the forecheck and the offensive zone. He's done a good job in the power play. I mean, Bobby McMann has been absolutely fantastic this season, and hopefully he can continue that hot stretch. He's having a career breakout year, and for him to be able to do that, given the cap hit once again, is a huge asset for the Leafs as they look at the trade deadline to acquire some other guys. John Tavares also, he's on the outside looking in from Team Canada's perspective, but he's had a lot of fun and a little jealous. You're dreaming about being in those opportunities playing for your country. There's a lot of people arguing he should have been out there on Team Canada. Probably should have been, but it is what it is. We have to focus now on the Leafs games ahead. And of course, the Team Canada final on Thursday, which is going to be great. I think we're all excited for Team Canada on Thursday. But Darius, before we wrap up, any predictions on the Thursday night game, Team Canada versus USA?
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one, and I do think Team USA is dealing with a lot of injuries right now. I think they're trying to play it off, but Brady Tkachuk missed practice again today. Matthews is dealing with an injury, which I think is pretty scary if you're a Leafs fan. But they're dealing with injuries. Haven't heard anything from the Canadian side, so just by luck of the draw, I think that Canada's due here. They're probably gonna win. I say due. They haven't really lost over the last 10 years internationally, but I think Canada's gonna win. It's gonna be tight though. Might be like 3-2 or something like that.
Yep, and hopefully we don't get goalied by Connor Hellebuck. We're interested to see what happens. We're going to keep you guys up to date with all the latest Leafs news, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on all these updates because Leafs hockey is finally back.